can you believe it that they make a motorcycle that makes me look like a full-size adult? See, we're pretty hardcore off-roader around here. Welcome back to the Lost Cause Ranch and what is another day in the life of a Land Rover hoarder, and we fit that bill more and more every single day. And if you're not familiar with this little series, this is our midweek update on what actually happens around the shop besides building that LR4 truck or the lightweight or anything else that is the main project of the channel at the time. This is what we do. And today we're talking L405. And are they as junk as everyone makes them out to be? Lately, it seems like everyone's dogging on how much of a pile of crap these are. And I'm here to tell you, not my experience. And I'm also here to tell you the likelihood of me using this harder than any of those people complaining about them is about 100%. If you've been around the channel for the past year or so that we've owned this, you have seen this haul everything. And I mean everything, including our 6-wheel Discovery. We had our buddy Troy from Addicted Motors find this a little over a year ago at a Mannheim auction. We bought it sight unseen, no info, as he likes to call it, a little Rover roulette. We didn't have any service history. It was a one owner. It had about 90,000 miles on it. We have about 110,000 miles on it now. And what has this thing required in that 20,000 miles? 11 or 12,000 miles of that have had a trailer and Land Rover in tow. Up to this point, 3 oil changes. Is that even possible? I mean, come on, we even towed the Eco Challenge Discovery back there from Iowa out to Moab, a little over 1,200 miles, unhooked the trailer, took this wheeling out in Moab, and towed the Eco Challenge back home with it. I've done more work on Jamie's Toyota RAV4 than we've done on a full-size 12-year-old Range Rover. Make it make sense. But no, everyone else dogs on them. I've had great experience. This thing's been one of the best vehicles I've owned. We're just doing some regular maintenance. We're gonna do transmission fluid and filter, spark plugs, oil change, rear brakes. That's it. Nothing's gone wrong. But before we dive into the 405 and bringing it back up to snuff, even though it's already up to snuff, it's good. I'm telling you, it's good. It's actually required the least amount of work on any vehicle that I've put that kind of miles on in a year. But no, before we get to that, we have a bit of a milestone today. Just washed up the old TFL Disco for the final time. It is all cleaned up, ready to go. Back to Tommy finally. He's got a shipper lined up to grab it. We were trying to coordinate schedules to have me bring it out or him come drive it back home, but nothing jived, so I'm happy that he's gonna get to enjoy this. And I'm sad I don't get to see such a nice example of a D1. And hopefully he gets to have fun with this guy for a little bit. All sorted out with studs, new gaskets. Should be just a good thing to get to use now. Before we get to all the stuff on the 405, we got race car things to do. Yeah, look at that. But now our intercooler just showed up, and I think I got about the maximum size that we could fit in there of something off the shelf. We're gonna have to do some trimming on some things, namely this area there. And I think we may put a hard cast 90 on the end of the intercooler. Once we blow a hole in the shroud here, we'll be able to slide this all the way over. And I need to decide if I want to modify the frame or modify the top of the grill. One of these is going to get modified, just not quite sure which one yet. Don't know. Or we got another option that we could clear up a tiny bit of room, and that is to chop this off section about a 1/2 inch off of it in the bottom, switch this over to a 2-inch inlet for the intercooler, which would match up with the outlet on the turbocharger, so we could run a 2-inch pipe there, come out with a 2.5 into the intake manifold. That might be the ticket. That would leave us a little more clearance on our little steering gear mount. I don't think we'll ever go left-hand drive with the lightweight, but if we want to, we'd have to rework all this setup anyways. But I'm just trying to make this the most efficiently, i.e. shortest routing from turbo to intercooler and intercooler to intake. But this guy just showed up, so I just wanted to set it in there so we can get some eyeballs on what is going to end up working out. We should have enough piping to make either of those options work. And man, if we have it shooting out here, that's quite the easy setup to that and pretty simple to there, all while leaving the factory radiator location all set. And then that'll sit behind our grill. So I think I'm happy with this, and it's also a pretty good size one. So this is much bigger than a 200 TDI factory intercooler. Now this is a 300 TDI, but it'll give you the idea of how they do it from the factory. We have a side-by-side radiator intercooler. I'm gonna go intercooler in front of radiator. We look under the hood, it just kind of shoots back from the intercooler into the intake manifold. 300 TDI is a little bit different because the turbo's backwards, but that just shoots into the lower part down there. Now, if we weren't running it on a series, I wouldn't mind replicating that setup, having side by side and not putting one in front of the other. But with an early series 2A with the inboard headlights, we just don't have that room to do side by side. It just wouldn't work. So I guess the first step is to chop that top part open. That way we can get a little better idea by setting the intercooler exactly where it's gonna sit. So once we get it into place, it'll kind of snug right up against that edge of the radiator opening. So it'll sit something like that versus where I had it sitting before, which will leave us a little bit. That's 100% clear for the radiator. But it's a good thing that the 200 TDIs run fairly cold-blooded, especially compared to like one of the V8s. So I don't suspect we'll have an issue there. We'll get a good polar fan in place, and keeping intake temps down also helps in the overall cooling and everything. Before we get to cutting into that, we're going to play with the 405. We do have a little bit of a trip coming up with this, so I just want to kind of give us a good baseline. I haven't had to do pretty much any maintenance besides oil changes since we got this, and we've put over 20,000 miles on it. As I said earlier, it's just been unbelievably good. So we'll just show it a little bit of love. None of this is issues. This is just regular maintenance, trying to keep ahead of the curve. Today on the 405, we're pretty much just doing like regular maintenance stuff. There is nothing that has gone wrong or popped up that has been a concerning issue. But I did buy this thing with zero service history, which is exactly how you want to buy 10-year-old nearly 100,000 mile Land Rovers. We've gotten pretty lucky with this one so far, but being we have no history, I just want to do some things that are smart to take care of. So what we got here is transmission fluid, OEM ZF stuff, OEM ZF filter pan combination. That's kind of neat. You'll see that when we pull it out. Some wiper blades, because currently we're poverty spec on those. We're gonna do a set of plugs. I also have issues with the rear pads, but we'll talk about that when we get to it. And we'll do an oil service as well. And I haven't decided yet, but I may do a swap out of the suspension fluid. So these are a combination of air and hydraulic. So it's got airbags or air struts to set the height. It's got hydraulic stuff going on to do the roll and the struts. So it's got hydraulics on the sway bar, hydraulics on the struts, and that's tied in with the power steering stuff. So it's probably not a bad idea to do a change of fluid on that. It's got 110-ish thousand miles on it. Also should rotate the tires. They're holding up decent. They look like they got no wear so far. I don't even know how many miles these have because I'm a child and I've had 3 different sets of wheels on it during the 20,000 miles that we've owned it. That's some good lighting you guys get a look at there. Oh, I missed the one right in the center. Could have jumped out and bit me. See, we're pretty hardcore off-roader around here. Fight! It's been a bit since I've had all the shields off. You can change the oil without taking those off. They got the transmission pretty well protected on these. This is more like a heat shield, but I mean, not a bad idea on a plastic pan. But that is underneath that, which also has some sound deadening and stuff. It appears we do have a little bit, there you go, now you can see it, of an oil leak. So we're gonna have to chase that down. Looks like it is above, coming off, I'm assuming the valve cover. You can kind of see it up on the exhaust manifold. Now that leak is something that's fairly new. It's not hitting the ground yet because the shield doesn't have any on it. But it doesn't look like it's terribly far from that point. So being this is like my only Land Rover that doesn't leave drops everywhere, we'll probably address that. Not today, but it will get addressed. We'll just make sure that's what it is first. Just kind of get a look at it as it's coming out. It's not new, but it looks pretty decent. These have like a amber colored fluid that go in them new, so it's not all burnt up. It's actually pretty clear. Still smells good too. That makes me happy. We have put this thing through its paces. I mean, it towed the Disco, the Eco Challenge Disco, up through the Rocky Mountains both ways and everything. The transmission held up better than the rear brakes. I think I cooked the rear brakes. Probably my fault. And while we're under here, we'll dump the engine oil as well before we rip the transmission pan off. We're just gonna get all the mess out of the way. Not a huge fan at how this is set up. If we let it go full bore, it just sprays off this brace that's for the front diff. If we don't wanna make a complete mess, we gotta let it go a little bit. This is why you just typically suck these out from the top for the most part, but we're under here and making a mess anyways, so. So we let that drip overnight to get everything out, and just for my own peace of mind, I'm gonna go ahead and finish up the oil change portion. We're gonna swap out to a new filter and pop some oil in it. Oil changes are just one of those things I just like to do and make sure oil's back in the car so we don't get distracted and try and fire this thing out without oil. Don't need that to happen. I did that once in my life. Would have probably been close to 20 years ago on my own vehicle. You usually notice pretty quick when the oil pressure light stays on and the engine gets louder than it was before. So I just like to complete that task if it's not something like a major engine teardown or anything like that. Oil back in, then we'll do spark plugs, because for the transmission side of stuff, to fill that, we need it running. So we may as well knock out the spark plugs before that. As much as I like to go pro level and not use a funnel, I suppose we'll just use one this time. And when you got a supercharger and all the associated intake piping with that, it's just a little harder to nail it without it. That and I feel lazy today. Less concentration needed. Now we're gonna run a little thicker oil. I typically run 5W30 in this guy. Through the winter, I'm gonna do 540 for this go round since we're gonna run it pretty hard and it is 100 frickin' degrees out. And then before the winter oil change, which will probably be in like a month or two, we'll switch it back to 530, I think. Maybe we won't. But this is no way a recommendation that you do this to your 5-liter. I've experimented with loads of different oil weights on these. And the biggest factor is just changing it early. Not necessarily the weight itself. You can run the 020 or 520 that they recommend, but I would just do it every 5,000 miles or so. It's cheap insurance. Don't go 15, don't go 20. This go round, I did 6,000 miles on it. This will be the 4th oil change we've done on this one. If we held at the factory interval, this would be pretty close to just what they want the first oil change at. Just to give you an idea, we've done 4 in the time of 1. So the most annoying part of the spark plug job to me is taking these off and getting them back on. There. Very difficult. And while we're looking in here, I mentioned before sucking oil out of these instead of draining them. Look at what they give you. They give you a little port to stick the tube right on it for the extractor. It's like the easiest thing in the world. But the spark plug job isn't all that terrible on these. We got 4 coils on each side to pull out. One little like T30 bolt. I think it's T30 if I remember correctly. Nice thing about the superchargers versus the NA ones, you get a good resting spot for the coils. And I don't know if any of you guys are here in the Midwest or what your weather's like where you're at, but holy cow, that is just sweat dripping from the couple minutes we just spent there. It is so freaking humid out. I mean, it's like 95 degrees today, but the humidity is like 120%, it feels like. Well, these almost look new. We'll swap them out anyways since we're here. That makes me feel pretty good because that means that they probably kept up on all the service then. One owner vehicle typically doesn't have just the plugs changed. It has everything done at the recommended intervals. Now, I don't think the supercharged stuff is quite as picky on plugs as turbocharged stuff, but they're still pickier than, say, the NA stuff on having a good plug. Just much like the oil change, it's not gonna hurt anything. It does suck though that spark plugs just aren't as cheap as they used to be. You can't just run a standard copper in these anymore. So instead of paying like $3 for a spark plug, we're paying $20 for each one. But a couple $100 isn't the end of the world. And we'll snake this guy back in. Doesn't seem as bad as on the LR4s, at least this side, to make it happy. It's still just a goofy thing if you ask me. One side done. Shocking, this side is in good shape too. Before we stick the insulation back on, we'll grab a mirror and kind of see what is leaking oil-wise. So I think it's from this back corner on the valve cover. Apparently it drained back down overnight. I guess I should have checked that. We'll let it drip a little bit more. And while we were waiting for the transmission to drain the rest of the way, we were in here in true Hoarder fashion, bidding on a Defender. And I thought this comment was pretty funny. We kind of got outed, that's us, after we bid. Could this be going out to pasture at the Lost Cause Ranch? They know. But no, we got outbid. We were the backup bidder on it. It didn't end up meeting reserve, and I don't think it ended up selling, so no more hoarding, or at least hoarding that one in particular, or at least at the moment. Now we're drained, I think. Get this pan out of there. So the pan is off and everything looks in order underneath there, nothing alarming. No loads of gunk on the magnets anywhere. See if I can get one out. Well, they're kind of stuck in there, but no. Just your typical fine material. And if you're not familiar with the newer style transmissions, this is the new filter, which is also a new pan. They integrate the filter right into the pan now. Good and bad. You get a new pan every time you do the filter. You also pay for a new pan every time you do the filter. But either way, we kept this stuff in stock when we had the dealership, so this is remnants of that, which is nice to have it laying around. And the nice thing about the OEM kit, it fits. No, we get ourselves a brand new set of bolts as well. So I used to have a Mighty Vac filler for transmissions, don't have it anymore. So we're just going to pump it in a ½ liter at a time here. You need to set the level on these while running and up to temp, but what we're going to do is get as much in as we can without it running. And then we'll get the scan tool in there, run it through the gears. So transmission fluid expands quite a bit with heat. So it is kind of critical to get this right. All right, so we got to be quick while this is running. When it is this warm out, we're up there running it through the gears. Make sure it sucked all the fluid it can. But we need to set this right around 40 degrees Celsius. They want you in the 30 to 50 degree range. And then you just fill it until it starts running out of the fill plug. And that's all fine and dandy when it's cold out, but much harder when it's warm because we're not that far off of 40 degrees Celsius ambient. But there, 40 on the nuts. I'll show you in just a second. I just want to swap out to the new fill plug and get this closed up since we have the level set. Ow. The catalytic converter's hot, in case you're wondering. And we're using our little top-down scan tool that they sent us. This thing's actually been pretty nice so far. And we're just in the transmission control module. You can see we are at 42 degrees now. We were just at 41 when we walked over, 40 when we filled it, so we should be right on dead perfect for level. We'll let this thing down, and we're probably gonna let it cool off a second, and then we'll get everything cleaned up and reassembled. We have all the bits to put back on. So we got it back somewhat assembled. I'm gonna leave our skid plates off, and we'll spray those off separate, and we'll be able to wash out the oil mess that is going on here. I'm pretty sure it is the valve cover. It actually doesn't look like it's leaking too bad up there, but it's probably just enough to start collecting down here. And I pulled a pretty good one on myself. You ever hide something from yourself so good that you can't find it? I wanted to keep it in a safe spot so I didn't lose it. And now I can't find it. But we need to do the rear brakes on this thing. So we got a new set of pads. There's plenty of pad life left on them, but they are squealing pretty hard. I think coming down the mountains last year towing, I think I probably cooked them a little bit. Everything seems to work fine, but we're just gonna swap them out because I can't stand listening to that thing just wail as we go. But to do that, we need the wheels off. And what do you think I can't find? So before we went up to Minnesota to grab that D2 parts rig, I went ahead and retorqued all the wheels just to make sure. Had this out, had it in my pocket. When I got to the house, I'm like, I should set this somewhere safe. I kind of remember putting it in the center console here, but it's not. It's not back where it should be by the spare tire. So I need to do some digging and find that. So the brakes will probably have to wait for another day, but that's all right. We need to drop it down off the hoist to dig around and find that wheel lock. It's around somewhere. In worst case scenario, we just use one of the gripper sockets and rip the thing off and replace it with a normal lug. But I'd like to not mess them up if possible. But before we drop it down, I kind of want to take a peek at where our running board's mounted and get a little bit of a game plan at how we can mount a little more structural rock slider. So we're going out to Ouray in a couple weeks for the National Rally, and I think I just may run out in the L405 unless something else pops up between now and then. If we do that, we're not gonna get super wild and don't necessarily need the protection on the rocker. We'll just be smart. But if we have time and I can sort something out in fairly fast fashion, maybe we'll build a set of sliders. And looking at some other points on this thing, I'm pretty impressed with how beefy it is. Like, I like this cross member here, the dual tube. That'll give us a good place to mount a more substantial skid plate if we ever get to that point. Something a little thicker than this 1/8 one, although that's pretty good for a factory piece that isn't intended on bashing off stuff. So we're just gonna have to tear this thing apart and find our wheel lock. The good news is it is gonna be in the last place I look. But either way, there is what my particular L405 has needed for 20-ish thousand miles, and we took it over the 100,000 mile mark. It's gonna need valve cover gaskets. I'll probably end up doing the cooling pipes at the same time because it's gonna have to pull the supercharger to do that. So we're gonna, while you're in there, but the coolant pipes aren't leaking. The valve cover gasket isn't leaking all that bad, and that's pretty typical of anything that has 100,000+ miles. That is not just a Land Rover thing. I think this thing has been great, and we have definitely put it through its paces. Like I said, more than half of those miles that we have put on it have had a Range Rover or Land Rover in tow behind it with a trailer. They're not as junk as everyone says they are. With that being said, we're gonna have to start digging around. I need to get this sorted out so I can get the wheels off, brakes on, get it ready to travel if we need to. And I truly do just frickin' love this thing. Guess it's not just Land Rovers that we hoard around here. How cute is that thing? And can you believe it that they make a motorcycle that makes me look like a full-size adult? But no, I really just need to stay off Facebook Marketplace. This popped up this morning and tossed an offer out, and she accepted, so we just had to have it. I was missing my little ruckus that I had a couple years ago, so this will kill that urge for a little bit at least. The thing sure is a blast, and if a guy takes a tape measure, it looks like it fits right there. But either way, with that being said, appreciate you guys watching, appreciate you subscribing, and we will catch you this weekend with either more LR4 stuff, more lightweight stuff, not more bike stuff though.